Hey guys, what's going on? Laying back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about You Are So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah. You Are So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah is an American coming-of-age dramedy that tells the story of Stacy Friedman, a Jewish teenager who's about to celebrate her upcoming Bat Mitzvah and transition into adulthood. She looks forward to celebrating the event with her family and friends, one of whom is her best friend Lydia. Things take a turn, however, when Stacy's crush on a boy at school named Andy comes between her and Lydia. The two find themselves ripped apart as a result of their differing perspectives, so Stacy must figure out how to save her Bat Mitzvah before it becomes totally unraveled. I'm always nervous to review a Happy Madison movie because Adam Sandler's movies don't have the best track record, but I'm glad this one turned out well in the end. Although it takes a long time to turn things around, once it did, it became a charming observation in the complicated world of teenagers becoming adults. Sunny Sandler plays the lead role of Stacy, and I actually wasn't the biggest fan of her character in the beginning. She's likable in a general sense, but she's pretty much an ordinary teenager with a crush on a boy, and there's not a lot done to make her stand out beyond this, at least when the movie starts. Later on, the movie explores her inner thoughts with narrations and shows her figuring out details of her Bat Mitzvah project, which helps out, though it still comes off as a typical teenage identity crisis. It isn't until much later in the movie that she finally starts to come into her own, and much of that is because of her friend Lydia. To be honest, I found Lydia to be even more bland compared to Stacy. There's nothing unique about her aside from the fact that she's Stacy's friend, and that's when she's even in the movie, as she isn't around enough in the first half of it to make a memorable impression. Now, you might be wondering why I like this movie when I don't have much good to say about the two central characters. Well, the two girls by themselves aren't anything special, but when they're put together and the movie hones in more on their conflict, it actually becomes a lot more riveting. It's been a long time since I've seen a movie that perfectly encapsulates how many teenagers behave and respond to conflict. Stacy and Lydia go behind each other's backs and act immaturely to each other, yet still have some degree of respect and love for each other, and I enjoyed seeing the relationship play out. Even outside of these two girls, the behavior of other teens in this movie is surprisingly accurate. The way they gossip and spread rumors, play games with each other, and always say weird lines of dialogue are just a few of the things this movie does to replicate the awkward transition period of adolescence, and it adds a lot to the experience of watching the story unfold. It also explores how teens change identities in order to both please and spite others. Whether it involves Stacy conflicting with her parents' traditions or trying to act cool for her crush, there's always something going on where she tries to pretend to be something she's not and has to learn to accept who she is, which is a good message to push. The whole romance aspect wasn't very interesting to me, mostly because it's little more than a love triangle between Stacy, Lydia, and the guy Andy, but I realize it's not supposed to be interesting, because Andy is written that way on purpose. The guy is dull as dishwater and nothing but trouble, and yet that's what makes him work. He acts exactly how a brat his age might be, and is meant to represent how Stacy is losing her identity over the course of the story. He contributes a lot to the story without doing much of anything at all, which is intriguing, and he also makes for good comic relief with his aloof nature. Conversely, the parents and other relatives in this movie were a lot of fun, and provide much of the moral guidance for Stacy to follow. Much of that is thanks to Adam Sandler, who is pretty much playing the same character as he always does in his movies, but thankfully he doesn't resort to any cringeworthy lines, and it's nice to see him bond with Stacy. All of the characters in general had great chemistry with each other, especially when Stacy comes to blows with her parents and even her sister Ronnie, who's played by her real-life sister Sadie. I realize that sounds like a moot point because all of the Sandler family appears in this movie in one form or another, but it still adds to the family dynamics and the identity crisis that Stacy undergoes. In terms of it being a comedy, it manages to be funny without being mean-spirited, which is odd considering the subject matter of this movie and how many other of Sandler's works have turned out. At the same time, though, it doesn't completely appeal to me, and I think that's because I'm not the movie's target audience. Aside from Adam Sandler, who's always great, the movie is heavily oriented toward teenage antics, a lot of which I already mentioned. Between the weird lines they say, the pranks they engage in, and the overall lack of maturity, it's not 100% enjoyable watching them as an adult. It's innocent enough, and it does get the job done, but I found myself enjoying the dramatic aspect more. A part of that is because of how well it integrates the Jewish culture into the story. It features the recitations of prayers, the traditional garments, and of course the mitzvah parties, which are entertaining in their own right. All of these things give the movie a sense of identity, but I also appreciate the fact that they never completely overtake the story. Stacy trying to make sense of her transition to adulthood is helped by her mitzvah project, but the movie's more focused on everything else that happens to her, which works in the movie's favor. It shows that there's so much else she isn't ready for yet, and she has to come to terms with these things before taking the next step of her life, and her struggle in this regard is communicated well. The story becomes a lot more emotionally nuanced over time. The rift between Stacy and Lydia goes from being mostly petty in nature to downright nasty. It was a bit shocking to see the movie go from being a relatively tame incident of two girls spatting to Stacy going out of her way to hurt Lydia, although at the same time, it never feels completely nasty between them. I liked how the movie was able to handle the subject matter related to them while balancing it with a light tone. Stacy doesn't realize how much her behavior hurts not just others around her, but herself as well, and it was great to see her gradually embrace her own uniqueness without the story becoming completely bogged down in toxicity. It's an interesting take on the coming-of-age narrative, where a girl becomes a woman and has to work past her insecurities and selfish desires and embrace her identity and community. It's nothing new for the genre, but it's still nice to see a good teen-oriented movie with a positive message behind it. Overall, You Were So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah is a fun coming-of-age story that succeeds in balancing both comedy and drama for its target audience. If you like coming-of-age movies and want to see one that has a more unique cultural perspective behind it, you'd enjoy checking this out. It takes a long time to get going, and the humor doesn't really work for me, but the chemistry of its cast and the earnestness of its themes eventually help it come out on top. This is the type of teen-oriented content that should be made, and it's one I'll be happy to see more of. What did you think about this movie? Did you think it was a good coming-of-age story, or did it fall flat for you? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of You Were So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Spanish horror flick, Killer Book Club. Bye bye!